The first team Katie and I played for had both boys and girls. It was all I wanted. Soccer mattered so much to me from the very beginning. It was my first source of pure joy. It was like someone had suddenly turned on all the lights in my life. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Two Goals. I am Katia,
And I'm Maria Laura.
and today we're doing things differently. I have in my hands the book Raise the Warrior, One Women's Soccer Odyssey, a one-of-a-kind piece awarded with the Vicky Orvis Book Prize, and it was launched after Women in Football's What If campaign in 2018. To discuss its relatable situations, ideas, and experiences that many women have gone through while working in football, and also to share a life story, we brought its author, California born and raised, documentary producer, and gender equality advocate, Susie Petruccelli. Susie, we are so happy to have you here with us.
Oh, thank you guys. It's so nice to meet you. I'm very excited to be with you.
Thank you. And to begin this interview, can you tell us in a few words, how did football arrive to your life?
Yeah, so, I think football arrived in my life sort of from the heavens. My parents were both sports lovers and sports fanatics. They met at Stanford University in Northern California. My dad was on the football team. And there's a story about my mom when she was a junior at Stanford and my dad was a sophomore on the football team. And the story goes that my mom would be standing in the stands yelling at the coaches from the sidelines, "Put Delelis in!" And, I didn't know, and they had never met before. And I didn't know it at the time, but, being a fan for her was one of the only opportunities that she had in sports. So, they raised all four of us kids to be athletes. At the time, the popular sports around in our neighborhood were American football and baseball and basketball. They were always on TV. And so those players were the stars that we looked up to. And, I was pretty sporty and I loved anything. I played anything with my big brother in the backyard and all the neighbors. But then when the time came for me to play, there was no opportunity for me. They didn't want me to play American football or baseball. So, that was disappointing. And, but I was lucky because at that time in the United States, girls were just starting to be allowed to play soccer. So, I was 5 and I was given a soccer ball and a uniform and, allowed to run around on the field with a bunch of other kids, boys and girls. And I just loved it right from the beginning. So I thought I felt extremely lucky. And, now, of course, knowing all the history and knowing how many girls are still not allowed to play around the world or discouraged from playing around the world, I appreciate that opportunity even more and am working to, grow the game around the world for girls.
Mm-hmm. And Susie, still about your childhood, you say in the first part of your book, competing in sports was also the beginning of a new relationship with my father. Soccer offered me a new opportunity to please him and capture his attention, which I always desperately craved more of. I wanted us to be able to relate to each other in a way. And taking this example of your personal experience and perspective, can you explain to us how important is sports, and in your particular case, in football, to strengthen relationships between daughters and parents?
Sure. Yeah, good question. So, I think sports was central to my relationship with both of my parents. I think for me, particularly with my father, he ran for or jogged for exercise every single morning of his life, like religiously. He got up, he stretched, he ran every morning. It didn't matter where we were or what we were doing. And that was sort of the example that he said, that exercise is essential, that physical health is essential. So, and also my earliest memories of my, bonding with him were being out on a field and kicking a ball around. And even to this day, the best memories that I have of him were when he was proud of something that I did on the field. But it was complicated too. And, he had very high expectations for all of us. And, in terms of my mom, it's interesting to look back and, pay her back really all the credit that she deserves for instilling a love and a passion for sports in me. It took me a while to see that, because I didn't see her as an athlete and now I know she didn't have opportunities to be an athlete. But, now I look back and I say, she was just as passionate about sports as the rest of us. So I always thank her now going back for that.
So there's something that you mentioned in a former interview, but also right now, just now, is that your parents had higher expectations for all of you. So this means what you mentioned in the former interview is that they wanted you to be a soccer player, but also a good student, like really, really good student and committed to your professional, in a way, career, starting to your professional career. And then you got into Harvard, which is top university, really, I can imagine, which is might be really hard for everyone to go there. So how was performing both as a player and a full-time student there?
Yeah, you're right. It's not easy. It wasn't easy. But, I think it's not easy for anyone to have two jobs at the same time. You're even professional athletes, women today, female professional footballers, most of them have two jobs, right? They're playing and they also are carrying a second job. So it was very similar to that. And, at Harvard, we were supposed to be, diligent students. And they were very demanding on us, but at the same time, we had this very, demanding second job, very time consuming to play soccer, and it was physically and emotionally exhausting to be on the soccer team. And, at Harvard was a funny place too. And I know there are other places like this where, and, particularly some Ivy League schools where there's a stigma that, the athletes at Harvard weren't considered quote unquote real Harvard students, which was hard for someone like me who was already a little bit insecure about my capabilities as a student. I had an identical twin sister who was, an excellent student and very, very, very diligent. So, I sort of backed away a little bit from my identity as a student, and I focused on the team, and, I focused on my comfort zone, right? My happy place, which was on the field with the team in the locker room. And then, so my priority was the team, and, that became problematic then later on, when I had an injury, and then that happy place was gone, and I sort of lost that part of my identity that I was taking all of my pride in. So yeah, it was definitely a challenge to do both at the same time, but I do think that most female athletes do that. I think most female athletes are, have multiple jobs, right?
It is but there was an important feature that you learned in Harvard, and I would like to read it from your book first, which is the other girls on my team told me a little bit about the law called Title IX and how it had made our team and most of the other women's team at Harvard and other universities in America impossible. So for us and our audience, of course, since we're not from the US, could you tell us a bit about Title IX and how this disrupts US sports panorama?
Sure, yeah. So Title IX was a law that was passed in the United States in 1972. And it essentially bans discrimination on the basis of sex within schools that receive federal funding. And the law, Title IX, is part of a larger education amendments at the time. And Title IX itself is only 37 words. It's very short, and it's crazy how vast the impact was. Basically, it made it illegal to spend disproportionately more on men's sports programs and women's sports programs. So let's say 1970, there were probably about approximately 100,000 girls playing high school sports in the United States, and today there are over 3 million. So it's really vastly changed the youth sports landscape in the United States. And that includes, all levels of schooling, and obviously up into the university level. and had a major impact on where our national soccer team is now. In 1970, soccer was the 20th most popular sport for girls in the United States, and now I think it's the third most popular sport in the United States. So it just exploded. So it had a huge impact, and it did two things. The goal, the purpose of Title IX was really to get women into higher education. There was no mention of the word sports in the law. So the law effectively did both things. It got this generation and following generations of women in the United States into higher education, into graduate school, medical school, law school, business school, starting now to get into boardrooms and decision-making roles. But it also created these generations of very, very highly skilled and very, very high-level athletes in the United States. So it's worked. It's worked for what it intended to do, and then it also had this amazing side effect of revolutionizing sports in the United States.
Yeah, it was a changing point, absolutely, and
yeah,
we should look up to it around the world for sure.
And sorry, Katia, I just want to introduce something, and which is really important, is what you're mentioning about focusing into education as well. It's not only about creating top athletes; it's also about education. That's something that I wanted to highlight from what you just mentioned.
Exactly. Yeah. And it goes. They work together. Right now in the United States, we have this emerging, generation. This first generation of we call them Title IX babies, right? Like I'm considered a Title IX baby. I'm the first generation of women that had both. We had high level academics and high level sports, and the way it's rippling around the world, hopefully. And just give, it's very hard to be a trailblazer and do something that no one else has done before, like Billie Jean King and all these amazing women, Moya Dodd, right? It's very, very hard to do that. Those women are legendary. And so now what we're doing is those women have created the pathway, and now our responsibility is to pave those pathways and make it easier for bigger groups of women to follow behind. And laws like Title IX are doing that, are helping to do that.
Exactly, absolutely agree. Now moving on into your professional career, we know you are extremely active and you are portraying diverse roles. So let's start with Coaches Across Continents. Can you tell us more about it and what is your role there?
Sure. Yeah. Coaches Across Continents is very near and dear to my heart. So Coaches Across Continents is an organization that was started by a guy who played soccer ahead of me at Harvard. His name was Nick Gates. He had a company before Coaches Across Continents that was a soccer coaching business, and he did very well with it, and he ended up selling it. And he realized that he could use soccer to teach more than just soccer. And so he started creating curricula to teach things like AIDS awareness and mental health and leadership and inclusion. Coaches Across Continents, he started basically in one village in Africa, and now they've grown, and I think it's been 12 or 13 years now, to over 50 countries around the world. So at the time that I was in my career, I was getting into advocacy and using sport for social good. They were starting to build curricula around gender equality. So we, sort of got together. I started being an advisor for them on that project. And, I really, really wanted to go on site with them and be a coach somewhere for them, somewhere around the world. But I had little babies at the time, so the timing wasn't right for that. But luckily for me, later on, just like 3 years ago, when I started working with Kelly Nascimento on her documentary, we got to join up and partner up with CAC, Coaches Across Continents, for a project in Zanzibar that actually is included in the documentary. So Coaches Across Continents is an amazing organization.
I mean, you just mentioned Kelly Nascimento, and it is quite amazing to explain to the audience that you have also worked with Pele's Foundation. So what's the purpose of this organization? Tell us a bit about the task or the consulting role that you have performed with them.
Sure. So I was lucky, very, very lucky to be introduced to Kelly Nascimento, who's one of Pele's daughters, through a mutual friend. And we started collaborating together on a few different projects. And one of Kelly's great ideas, she's full of great ideas, but one of her great ideas was to build a foundation that uses soccer to promote world peace. And, you know, she always jokes that when other kids were singing in the shower when they were kids, she was saying speeches and pretending she was Secretary of State. So, you know, she basically had this dream to work together with all of her siblings and build on her father's legacy, and grow this foundation. And so that's what we're trying to do with her foundation.
And at the same time, you're involved with equal playing field. I mean, I think you have like more than 24 hours a day, Susie, if you want me to say this. But what would you highlight from this initiative? Why are you involved with them?
So, you know, I came into the Equal Playing Field initiative after they had already broken 2 world records. It's an amazing group of women. And so they had already broken a world record for the highest elevation soccer match ever played and the lowest elevation soccer match ever played, to show how far women will go to play the sport that they love. They might use a different metaphor, but that's the one that I like. And so I came in after those first two expeditions had already been completed, and I helped this amazing filmmaker, Amy Rose Eisenbach, with a documentary about those first 2 expeditions. And then I luckily got to participate in their next set of world record breaking games, which were in Lyon during the World Cup last summer. So I am a Guinness World Record holder, which is very exciting. I have my medal around here somewhere. And we played in the longest 5-a-side match ever played. And it was very hot. It was like 100 degrees, and it was absolutely, absolutely amazing. So, and they ended up breaking a 4th world record that week. So now this amazing group, Equal Playing Field Initiative, has 4 Guinness World Records. Yeah, they're just amazing. They've gone on to do amazing things. Maggie Murphy, one of the founders, is now the GM at Lewis FC. Mm-hmm. And Laura Youngson started a company doing female ergonomically correct cleats for women. They're both just amazing people. Everyone in that organization is amazing.
I mean, since we're talking about your professional experiences, which are plenty, of course, and we are happy to share this, we want to focus also on your communication sides. And I want to speak about communication. It's not only about interviewing, it's not only about written press, but being a book author yourself and also a producer, you know that audiences are demanding a lot more. I mean, like in terms of they want short videos, long videos, they want podcasting, they want broadcasting. So do you think, in your opinion, is there enough football cultural documentaries available, or is it a sector which should be more explored?
It's sort of sad how few women's soccer, women's sports media is out there. I didn't say that properly, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. You know, in the United States, women's sports gets only 4% of investment in the sports media landscape, and we did have 6% at one point a few years ago, and the trend is going down, which is very disappointing and very sad. So we need to turn that around for sure. And you know, there's this whole idea. Actually, Moya Dad was just on this amazing podcast with Sue Anstis in England called The Game Changers. And she was talking about, you know, this whole idea that there's no demand to watch women play sports. And she was saying that it's the biggest fallacy that's been sold to us in this century. And in the last century, sorry. And, you know, she was saying that it's not something that occurred on its own, and that it was deliberate, and that women have been kept out of of sports media, and out of professional sports. And, even I've seen it, even just trying to publish my book. I was told before it was published by some people that there's just no audience for a women's sports story. I obviously that's not true. We all know that's not true. And so, it's up to us to prove that there's an audience and build the market and, provide the data that shows where the market is and how to reach the market and, move on from there.
Actually, Susie, on that note, it is really interesting what you're mentioning about understanding the audience itself, the targets, because I think this is a pattern. I mean, you're mentioning a struggle for women being into like becoming a product for communications, but at the same time, there is something else which is a barrier in other regions, and I will definitely think we need to exchange best practices between, let's say, South America and podcasts like The Game Changers, because that's something else. Like that's another completely other reality. I mean, portraying women in South America. Oh my God, that we have other problems, but we can learn from that, definitely.
Yeah, and I do think that even just telling stories of young girls who love the game and have found their own pathway in the game shows other little girls that they're not as different as they may be told they are. And that there are millions of girls just like them that, where soccer or whatever sport it is their love of their life, and that's okay and it's amazing and that they need to go for it. So I think in that way, any kind of storytelling, any kind of platform where you can share more girls' sports stories is really important. It's really important for little girls to see other little girls just like them.
Yes, and it's exactly what we want to do with this platform, is to portray different range of roles that they can be in the future, because usually we don't have access to this information, and it's just for us to portray these women out there, for them to aim to be like them. And
yeah.
Going deeper on your contributions in this area, we know there's a documentary coming up soon with Kelly Nascimento, as you mentioned before, which features top sports figures such Alex Morgan, Marta, Enya Luco, Neymar, Billie Jean King, Julie Fondy, Abby Wambach, among others. So please, can you tell us what Warriors of a Beautiful Game is about and when it will be launched?
Yeah, thank you. I would love to tell you. So the documentary that we're making with Kelly is called Warriors of a Beautiful Game. It's the story of a young Brazilian female footballer who was born in a favela. And, she's dreaming of becoming a professional footballer. And, she wants, that's her dream, not only because she's so passionate about the game and she loves it and she's amazing at it. But she also believes that that's her avenue to get her family out of the favela. And it's a fascinating story. She is a genuinely magnificent person, and a magnetic person and a lovable person. And it's going to be a great story. Even just during the filming, there was a lot of emotions, a lot of crying. When I was crying when we were interviewing Marta, I was crying when we were interviewing so many of the people that we got to interview. Even someone I couldn't understand the language. Marta was speaking in Portuguese. I had no idea what she was saying. I was still crying. And it's going to be a great film, and it's I hope an important one and a beautiful one. And it will be out this year. We're talking to distributors now, which is very, very exciting.
We are excited to watch it already.
Me too.
As this is a different episode and you're connected with culture specifically, we all know that football can be a platform for communicating values, changing stereotypes, and accessing to other realities. And with people like you, there is some proof of an increasing interest in generating content around football. So regarding specifically to women's football, what do you think it's necessary to appeal to their stories, and keep potentializing women's football literature and audiovisual production?
Yeah, so I think that the challenge is to get people to connect to the human stories of other people, right? And as children, we're inspired by the things that we see on screens, and the things that hopefully we're reading in books. Although I can't get my kids to read very much these days, but and there's a huge gap in the amount of stories that we find about boys and girls. And it's critical that both boys and girls see girls as equals in every arena, including sports. And I guess that's what I would say. It's we need to find a way for kids to connect to both boys and girls, to connect with the stories of girls. So that's my goal.
You know what you just mentioned, it is amazing. I mean, I can definitely relate, because I play a bit of football. I mean, not professionally at the end, but when I was a kid, I used to love playing. And my parents, they were like yours. They loved me to practice plenty of sports. But I would have loved to relate to a footballer in fairy tales, let's say, like not to kings. And I mean, in Colombia, we don't have kings. We don't have monarchy or something to relate to. But I can imagine myself reading a book about a sports woman or a sports guy. I mean, and their path into, I don't know, going into college or gaining a prize, and all this stories around sports, they are really, really interesting. I mean, themselves, they don't need to add some more fantasy. They're really cool for them to follow. So I definitely think that this is this is an opportunity for writers out there to try and get to those stories.
Yeah, I agree. I think and it's going to be a challenge, because there is a barrier. There is sort of this stigma, really, that there is no market for these stories. So we just have to prove one at a time, and by one by one, that people do love these stories and they relate to them. I actually think it's kind of strange that we're having to try so hard to prove this, because people love reality TV. People love TV about regular people, and they love to see their ups and downs and their daily lives. The humdrum stuff and the ups and downs. So to me, it seems obvious. I've said this before. It's kind of like a cheesy term, but like reality literature, right? It's stories about regular people. And for me, the ones that I relate to, or gravitate to, I guess, are about female athletes at any level. Little kids, kids going through issues in high school in sports, especially like for me, the mental health side, I'm always interested in. And I think that's particularly somewhere where we need to share more and open up more about and talk about more.
Yeah, and I would like to add a note here that we all know that football and literature and culture, it goes hand in hand through society, to all ages and eras. And we have to look specifically to the book part, literature parts. It's only to say the struggle of to find a book about football, specifically women's football. I think it says it all. If we want to find some literature about women's football, it's difficult nowadays. You can go to Amazon and maybe we can find one, but you go to a library and it's almost I would say only difficult to find one, not to say more than that. And this shows us the lack of attention that is supported by the industry to this case. And when I say industry, I say the cultural part and also the football part, because you mentioned the education. We need to educate ourselves, and also the governing bodies and the national governments. They have to look up to this. And I would like to say, because I have a background in literature, I think the kids nowadays, they enjoy sports, they enjoy football. Why not to introduce some football literature inside of the education part? the educational part. Of course, we need to portray the literature heroes, but also these ones. And if the governments look into it, I think all of us would be more happy in the future.
Yeah, I agree. And I think part of that will change naturally. You know, like I was saying, right, we have these new generations of highly educated women and high level athletes coming through together now. And so I do think that naturally those women will be writing stories and sharing stories and publishing stories and buying stories and producing stories. So I do think that, you know, it's going to get there naturally because there's a demand for it now. But it's been a little slower than I thought. So, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
So, Susie, definitely we cannot let you go out of our podcast today without recommending 2 books and 2 documentaries. I mean, if you want to recommend some more, we're really happy to have this. And Katia and I, we can promise that we will watch them. At least you have two new viewers, but I'm sure there's plenty of people out there interested on that information.
Yeah. Well, I actually stacked up 2 stacks of books over here. I don't know if you could see them behind me. I stacked up a bunch of my favorites. And maybe I can send you guys the whole list at some point. But, you know, basically anything by, Billie Jean King. I have the Dick Kerr Ladies book over here by Barbara Jacobs. I have Julie Foudy's book. I have Girls of Summer, which is the book that is going to be made into a movie by Netflix about the 99ers. I have The National Team by Caitlin Murray. I have Sue Lopez's A Guide to Women's Football. I have so many. I'll send you guys the whole list. And then as far as what to watch, I would say watch anything that Bex Smith is putting out on Copa 90. She's just amazing, and she's building out the women's side of Copa 90. She's just doing amazing things. So Google her. Those are my recs.
Perfect.
Yeah, we also recommend her. She was our professor. She gave us a guest lecture, and we also recommend her to all the audience. So Susie, you close your book with the following statement. But most of all, I don't want any girl to be alone when she experiences inequality for the first time. I want to be there, letting her know that there is a massive growing army fighting to make things equal for her before she grows up. This is our responsibility. So we normally finish our episodes with an advice, but in your case, can you tell our audience why they should read your book and how important it can be for girls and women in football?
Well, thank you for saying that it's important. I appreciate that. I guess, it's sort of like, so somebody just mentioned to me, I was feeling guilty because I wasn't able to sit down and watch every single one of the NWSL games for the Challenge Cup that's on right now in the United States. And, you can find it on Twitch internationally too. And I was upset at myself because I just couldn't make the time to sit and watch the games. But a friend of mine recently said, he's like, you can't beat yourself up about it. He's like, just turn the game on, record it. Even just making the time to do that, you have it on in the background if you can, that registers in terms of ratings and the data, and is one of the most valuable one of the most valuable things you can do to move the game forward. So for me, that's an important piece. And also, in my case, just buying the book or buying another book about women's soccer by someone else, that act is a huge part of the movement. And it's really going to make a difference, because proving that there is an audience is one of the biggest hurdles that we're facing right now.
Susie, thank you so much for these words, and thank you for this time. I mean, this is the first time that we are dealing with culture itself, like literature, focus on women in football in our podcast, and we have had a blast with you. Thank you so much for enlightening us.
Oh, you guys are the best. Thank you, and congrats to both of you on graduating.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And remember, everyone, this is a space for football and literature and culture and documentaries. So please feel free to join us. Feel free to share your stories. And remember to follow us on Twitter and Instagram with the name Two Goals Podcast, and on YouTube. Now we're available on YouTube. If you prefer that platform, please go there and give us a listen. And thank you so much for hearing us.
Thank you.